It's a bleak and inhospitable place. Blizzards and katabatic winds can blow in from nowhere and last for days.
But about halfway up, there's a strange dark smear visible in the pristine ice.
An Antarctic scientist shared a shocking confession just before vanishing without a trace, hinting at a hidden truth beneath the icy wilderness. In 1965, Carl Disch walked into the brutal emptiness, leaving whispers of strange lights and strange behavior. His footprints led away from safety until they simply disappeared. Despite extensive searches, no trace was ever found. Let us pull back the veil to uncover what might have driven him into the abyss, or what might have taken him there. Byrd Station's Phantom Footsteps. In the heart of Antarctica, amid the icy expanse and relentless wind of 1965, something happened that would be whispered about for decades. A scientist vanished without a trace, leaving only chilling questions behind. It was a time before GPS or high-tech trackers. Just a man, his knowledge, and an unending abyss of ice and secrets. This wasn't just any researcher either. This was Carl Robert Disch, a physicist whose brilliance was matched only by the mystery that would soon envelop him. What they discovered next would change polar exploration forever, revealing secrets meant to stay buried. Disch wasn't your everyday scientist. Born in a small German town, he was fascinated by the world around him from an early age, his interests leading him across continents to pursue advanced studies. Eventually, he earned his PhD in particle physics, and his work brought him to Byrd Station, one of the loneliest places on Earth in Antarctica. Byrd Station was never a vacation spot. It was a punishing, isolated research outpost, a place where the weather could change in the blink of an eye, turning a short walk into a deadly game of survival. He, however, seemed to thrive in this environment. He was diligent, determined, and, at least at first, seemed to have his mind together. Yet something changed. His colleagues, who once admired his sharp intellect and dedication, began to notice his behavior shifting. It was subtle at first, longer walks, murmurs to himself, but then the situation escalated. He was seen wandering aimlessly around Byrd Station, muttering incoherently. The man who had once given lectures to packed rooms full of young physicists now appeared lost, even in his own mind. His colleagues were concerned. They tried reaching out, offering support, but their efforts were met with a cold wall of silence. On May 8th, Carl made the choice that would lead to his disappearance. In the early hours of the morning, when darkness still cloaked the ice and wind tore at anything in its path, he left a small radio booth where he had been working. This booth was a mile away from the main station building, connected by a rope, a lifeline in such hostile weather. That morning, dressed in his Antarctic gear, he stepped out, presumably to head back to the main station. But he never made it. When he didn't arrive at the station by 10 o'clock, his colleagues formed a search party, expecting to find him huddled somewhere along the rope. What they found instead was a confusing series of footprints, leading not along the rope, but away from it, as if he had chosen, for some inexplicable reason, to head directly into the wilderness. The footprints stretched for miles, 4 to be exact, before they suddenly vanished. There was no sign of a struggle, no indication that he had been attacked or had fallen into a hidden crevasse. The scientists scoured the area, battling the relentless wind and the biting cold. But there was nothing. No body, no further tracks. Just a trail that ended, as if Carl had been plucked from the earth. It wasn't until weeks later that he was officially declared dead, though his body was never found. Speculation ran wild. How could a seasoned scientist, familiar with the harshness of the environment, simply lose his way? And why had he deviated from the rope? If he was lost, surely he would have tried to retrace his steps, but there were no signs of hesitation in his tracks. They led westward, away from the station, with purpose, until they didn't lead anywhere at all. Theories about his disappearance range from the plausible to the outright bizarre. One of the more grounded ideas was that he had suffered a mental breakdown. His erratic behavior leading up to his disappearance seemed to support this. Perhaps he had snapped under the immense pressure and isolation of life at Byrd Station. Some speculated that he had wandered off with the intent to end his life, finding some secluded place in the ice where he could disappear forever. But other theories delved into stranger territory. Some of his colleagues reported seeing unusual lights in the distance, strange flickering that couldn't be explained by natural phenomena. There were even whispers of Soviet agents. After all, this was the height of the Cold War. Could Carl have been a spy, extracted from Antarctica by a covert team? It seemed unlikely, but in an environment as extreme and secretive as Antarctica, almost anything seemed possible. Then there were those who suggested something even more outlandish: extraterrestrial involvement. The strange lights, the absence of any logical trail, and the suddenness of his disappearance, it was enough to fuel imaginations already running wild with fear and isolation. Could Dish have stumbled upon something he wasn't meant to see? Something that took him far beyond the icy expanses of Earth? Though far-fetched, this theory persisted, especially among those who were desperate for an explanation that made sense of the otherwise inexplicable. Despite the numerous search efforts, which involved planes, helicopters, and even ground personnel forming human chains across the frozen terrain, no trace of Dish was ever uncovered. The harsh Antarctic conditions, with temperatures plunging to minus 42 degrees Celsius and winds capable of erasing tracks in minutes, made the search all the more difficult. Each search party returned empty-handed, their hopes crushed under the weight of the relentless cold. For those who worked alongside him, his disappearance wasn't just a tragic loss. It was a chilling reminder of the dangers they all faced every day. Antarctica was beautiful, but it was deadly, indifferent to the presence of humans and their ambitions. It was a place that could swallow a person whole, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions. His disappearance also highlighted the importance of mental health in these extreme environments. Scientists were often expected to endure long periods of isolation, with limited communication with the outside world and few outlets for stress. Byrd Station, like many Antarctic research outposts, was an unforgiving place, both physically and mentally. The pressure to perform, combined with the constant threat of the elements, could push even the most stable minds to their breaking points. The search for answers grew colder, and Carl's disappearance started to haunt the scientific community. Lost minds in the cold embrace of isolation. The scientific community was left to grapple with the implications of his disappearance. How could they prevent something like this from happening again? Safety protocols were reviewed and revised, mental health support systems were discussed, and researchers began to take the psychological impacts of isolation more seriously. As the years passed, the mystery of Carl's disappearance only deepened. Each retelling of the story seemed to add new details, new theories, and new fears. It became a cautionary tale among those who ventured to the icy continent, a reminder of the thin line between adventure and danger, between exploration and oblivion. And while some clung to the hope that he might still be out there, alive somehow, most knew that he was likely lost forever. Another victim claimed by the vast, merciless expanse of Antarctica. The legacy of his work lived on, but it was forever overshadowed by the mystery of his disappearance. His contributions to particle physics were significant, his research groundbreaking. But all anyone could talk about was the way he vanished. He had gone from being a brilliant scientist to a ghost story, a legend that haunted the cold halls of Antarctic research stations. His name became synonymous with the dangers of the unknown, a symbol of the price that could be paid for pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. But he wasn't the only scientist to disappear under mysterious circumstances. The scientific world is full of such stories, of researchers who ventured too far, who got too close to something they shouldn't have, or who simply vanished without a trace. Take, for example, Vladimir Alexandrov, a Soviet physicist who disappeared in 1985 while in Spain. Like Dish, Alexandrov was brilliant, known for his work on nuclear winter, a concept that terrified many and shaped international policy during the Cold War. He vanished while on a trip to Madrid, and theories about his disappearance range from defection to abduction by the KGB. To this day, no one knows what happened to him. Then there was Boris Weisfeiler, a mathematician who vanished in Chile in 1985. He had gone hiking alone in the mountains, and when his backpack was found next to a river, authorities concluded he had drowned. But rumors persisted that he had been abducted, that he had stumbled upon something he shouldn't have. Despite extensive searches, no trace of Weisfeiler was ever found, and his disappearance remains one of the many unsolved mysteries that haunt the scientific community. Another notable disappearance was that of Peng Jiamu, a Chinese biologist who vanished in 1980 while leading an expedition in the Lop Nur Desert. He left a note saying he was going to look for water, and then he was never seen again. The harsh desert landscape swallowed him whole, much like the icy expanse of Antarctica had swallowed Dish. Despite extensive search efforts, no trace of Peng was ever found, and he too became a legend, a reminder of the dangers faced by those who venture into the unknown. Dish's disappearance was not an isolated incident, but it was one that resonated deeply within the scientific community. It served as a stark reminder of the risks inherent in exploration, risks that were not just physical, but mental and emotional as well. The isolation, the pressure, the unforgiving environment, all of these factors could push a person to their breaking point, and sometimes there was no coming back. The mystery surrounding Dish has often been compared to other notable disappearances of adventurers and explorers. Antarctica, a continent so remote and unyielding, holds many secrets within its icy embrace. Dish was just one among those who dared to venture into the harsh frozen expanse and lost his life to its unforgiving nature. His disappearance has brought to the surface the myriad dangers faced by those willing to test the limits of human endurance in pursuit of knowledge. With the mystery in Antarctica unsolved, memories of past explorers' tragic ends returned, a grim reminder of the risks. The thin line between heroism and disappearance. One such comparable incident was the disappearance of Sir Ernest Shackleton's crew members during the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition of 1914 to 1917. Shackleton's expedition faced numerous adversities, from their ship being trapped and eventually crushed by sea ice, to the crew members battling frostbite, hunger, and disorientation in the vast Antarctic wilderness. Shackleton himself, along with a few others, embarked on an 800-mile journey in an open boat to seek rescue for his stranded men. Although Shackleton's journey ended in a heroic rescue and most of his crew survived, some men were never found. Their disappearance, like that of Dish, became one more of Antarctica's chilling mysteries. The stark reality is that Antarctica does not forgive mistakes. A wrong turn, a misstep, or a momentary lapse in judgment can have deadly consequences. For him, who seemed to purposefully walk away from the safety of Bird Station, the reason behind his deviation from the rope is the crux of the mystery. Why did a man so familiar with the hostile environment willingly move away from safety? Was it despair, confusion, or something beyond human comprehension? The theory that Dish's behavior was the result of a mental breakdown is compelling, particularly given the extreme psychological stress faced by individuals stationed in remote locations like Antarctica. Long periods of isolation, a lack of natural sunlight, and constant exposure to extreme cold can take a heavy toll on the human psyche. His colleagues had noted his increasingly erratic behavior in the days leading up to his disappearance. He was often seen muttering to himself and wandering aimlessly around the station, actions uncharacteristic of a scientist known for his intellect and composure. It is plausible that the harsh conditions led him to a point of mental collapse, causing him to make the fatal decision to walk into the wilderness. The idea of Soviet involvement, while intriguing, is less supported by concrete evidence. During the Cold War, espionage and covert operations were rampant, and it is not inconceivable that both the United States and the Soviet Union had their eyes on Antarctica. With its remoteness and international research presence, the continent could have provided a unique opportunity for intelligence gathering. However, the theory that Dish was a Soviet agent or that he was abducted by Soviet operatives remains speculative at best. The absence of any substantial evidence to support this theory makes it one of the more sensational but ultimately less credible explanations. Similarly, the extraterrestrial theory appeals to those who are inclined to believe in phenomena beyond our world. The strange lights observed by some of Dish's colleagues and the abrupt end of his footprints certainly add an element of mystery that is difficult to explain through conventional means. The idea that Dish may have encountered something extraterrestrial is captivating, but like the Soviet theory, it lacks evidence. The human mind often seeks extraordinary explanations for events that defy understanding, especially in an environment as alien as Antarctica. The harshness of the continent, combined with its remoteness and the mental strain experienced by its inhabitants, creates the perfect setting for such theories to flourish. The disappearance of Carl Disch also brought attention to the physical dangers of Antarctica. The climate is unrelenting, with temperatures that can drop to minus 50 degrees Celsius and winds that howl across the ice at speeds of over 100 kilometers per hour. Frostbite, hypothermia, and disorientation are constant threats. The fact that his footprints led away from the safety of the station suggests that he may have become disoriented, perhaps due to the intense colder wind. The phenomenon known as whiteout, where the landscape becomes a featureless expanse of white, obliterating all sense of direction, could easily lead even an experienced explorer astray. In such conditions, losing sight of a lifeline rope could mean the difference between life and death. In addition to the physical dangers, the psychological effects of isolation in Antarctica are profound. Winter over syndrome is just a fancy way of saying that if you spend enough time in a frozen wasteland, cut off from the rest of the world, your mind starts to rebel. Depression, irritability, sleeplessness, and the occasional mental fog. These aren't exactly thrilling souvenirs, but they're what a lot of folks end up bringing back from Antarctica. And it's not like this is a new discovery. People have been going stir-crazy down there since the first explorers figured out how to get that far south without freezing solid on day one. Take Disch, for example. He was stationed at Byrd Station for months, and while at first it might have been manageable, eventually the cold and the endless darkness started to get to him. His colleagues noticed he wasn't quite himself in the days leading up to his disappearance. It's not hard to see why. When you're living in a frozen, isolated environment with no escape, surrounded by people who are also slowly losing it, it's easy to understand how someone might snap. The official term is winter over syndrome, but honestly, it's just what happens when humans are plopped in a place they really don't belong. What is winter over syndrome really? Picture this. You're in a tiny research station, isolated from everything. Outside, it's a never-ending night. Temperatures are so low it feels like nature is actively trying to kill you, and there's no way to leave until the weather permits, which is months away. Your brain has no sunshine, no new faces, and no change of scenery. What happens next is almost inevitable. You start feeling down, tired, irritable, and maybe even forget why you signed up for this in the first place. Welcome to winter over syndrome. This phenomenon isn't new. It's been around since the early Antarctic expeditions. In fact, Dr. Frederick Cook, a physician on the Belgian Antarctic expedition way back in 1897, was among the first to document it. He saw his fellow crew members getting irritable, struggling with sleep, and generally just not handling the isolation all that well. Turns out human beings weren't exactly made for months of darkness and no escape. A lot of factors contribute to this winter over mess. First, there's the isolation. Imagine being in one of the most remote spots on Earth. No flights in or out, nobody dropping by to visit. It's just you, the same small group of people, and a lot of emptiness. The Antarctic winter isn't a friendly place either. It's dark, freezing, and about as welcoming as a refrigerator left out in the Arctic. All this darkness messes with your sleep, throws your mood into a blender, and before long, you're not doing well. Then there's the monotony. Same four walls, same white landscape, same people, day in and day out. Boredom turns into mental exhaustion, and the stress starts piling on. And let's not forget that the physical body starts acting strange too. There's something called polar T3 syndrome, where your thyroid hormones start doing odd things. Triiodothyronine, or T3, levels drop, which might explain why people become forgetful, grumpy, and even physically slower. It's like your body and mind are conspiring to remind you that Antarctica isn't somewhere you're supposed to be. Psychologically, winter over syndrome is a nightmare. Depression shows up uninvited, dragging along its friends, irritability, insomnia, trouble focusing, and a desire to just stay away from everyone. For some people, the sadness can feel overwhelming. Others just get mad at everything and everyone, sometimes over really small things. Then there's the withdrawal. People start to distance themselves, and before you know it, everyone's doing their own thing, isolated even in close quarters. It's a bad cycle that makes an already tough situation even harder. How do people deal with it? They try a bunch of different things. Keeping a solid daily routine can help. It makes life feel a little more normal, whatever that means in Antarctica. Exercise is a big one. Getting up and moving is not just good for the body, but it helps keep the mind from spiraling. There are also social activities, group dinners, game nights, anything to remind everyone that they're in it together. Light therapy is used too. Since there's no real sunlight, they make do with special lamps to help trick the body into thinking it's getting some rays. And of course, having access to psychological support is crucial. Sometimes it's on-site, sometimes it's over a screen, but either way, talking it out helps. Studying this whole winter-over situation has had some unexpected benefits. Life in Antarctica isn't all that different from what people might experience in space. So as scientists figure out how to make life more bearable at the South Pole, they're also laying the groundwork for what astronauts might need if we ever decide to head out to Mars. Isolation, boredom, stress, it's all pretty similar, and what works in Antarctica might just work up there. How would you handle months of darkness and isolation? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, leave your thoughts, and subscribe for more thought-provoking content.